Thanks, Brother Tanner. I've brought some helpers with me today who will be participating with us a little bit later on. But I want to recognize that we have Elder Blazer here, whom I think many of you know. He'll be assisting in a kind of a Q&A panel, as will Brother Tanner. And over here, I'd like to introduce my boss, Michael Bliss, who is a vice president here at the university. He's in charge of administration, and that includes finance. And so even though we don't have chiefs at the school here, if we were to assign a title to Brother Bliss, it would be Chief Financial Officer here at the university. I'd like to acknowledge today that this is a low-tech presentation. I decided not to do PowerPoint and to do a bunch of fancy slides. I find that they're helpful sometimes, especially if I'm addressing a very large audience, but I thought our group might be a little bit more intimate today, and we could actually work with ancient technology. This came just right after hieroglyphs. It's called transparency, okay? And we're gonna fill these out as we go and kind of work through some examples together so that you can experience for yourself what I'm talking about. Now, if I step away from the microphone, you can still hear me, right? We're not that far away from each other, so. And I better get a transparency on this screen. They'll never forgive me if I just scribble on the screen. As upcoming entrepreneurs, people who are sticking your toe in the water, so to speak, with owning your own business or being a significant part of a business, I wonder if you could describe for me a useful model for how to look at the overall management of a business called the three-legged stool. Any of you heard of that? Any of you milk cows? You've milked with a one-legged stool. All right. Any of you heard of the three-legged stool example? Well, help me out here. So we're gonna put a seat, and it's gonna be held up by three legs. Not a very good stool, but it'll work. And we're going to pretend that that stool is a business. And there are kind of three things that you've got to stay focused on all at the same time. One isn't really more important than the other, although there may be an order to the time periods in which you focus on these different legs that support the business. But you've got to keep all three in balance, and you've got to kind of keep them in front of you all the time as a business owner. So who would like to at least venture a guess as to what one of those legs are? Yeah.
HR, human resources type stuff.
Okay, HR is important, yes, but we would include that in something something more broad as category. Employees are HR. Customer service is important, yeah, and I put that over here too. Yeah, you're in a finance class, so you know you've got to, you know that finance has got to be one of the legs of the stool, but certainly finance is a major leg to our three-legged stool. Don't you have to get the idea out there? Don't you need to have customers? Right? Marketing, yeah. And then finally, we're going to put everything else, as important as all these other elements are, in a big bucket called operations. Okay? So that's where your people, your computer systems, your manufacturing or buying systems, all those things come together, and you're going to pour some capital into into those bundle of activities, and hopefully get more money out on the other side. So this to me has been a useful model, and I think that the categories are broad enough that you can fit almost everything that you will learn about business into one of these things. But you've got to have customers. You've got to have a way to deliver to your customer what that customer wants. And then you also have got to prime the pump, prime the machine by having appropriate finance as you do that. Well, let's narrow our focus then just a little bit and talk about an element of finance that will be important to you no matter where your skills happen to be. So you may be in operations, you may be over in marketing, you may be the key guy over a business trying to run all three. And this is something that you've got to keep your eye on all the time as an owner. Who's heard of the cash cycle? A couple of us. Yeah. Let's work with the student here for a minute. Well, how does the cash cycle work? Let's work together here and help each other out. So where's the cash cycle start? Pardon? Well, no, it really doesn't. It contributes to it. Investors, yeah, somebody has to inject capital into your system. So that's really the beginning point. We'll call the top of that cash cycle then cash injection. You've heard that term a lot, and it means a lot of things. But it starts with an injection of cash into your idea. Then where does the cash cycle go? What happens next, typically? Speak up. Yeah, typically you make some kind of an investment, and it might be in inventory. You might acquire a product. It might be in manufacturing operations, depending on what you're doing. It might be in the acquisition of some people, coming back around to the HR example. But you'll typically make some kind of an investment. All right? What's the next step in the cash cycle? Revenue. You're hoping that after you've invested, or and I'll use this word, and I hope that you won't take it the wrong way, but we're going to somehow manipulate the capital. We're going to operate on the capital. Then at some point we've got to convert whatever we see. We made the first conversion here. We took a cash injection. We invested in a series of activities or equipment or inventory. Now we're going to make another conversion in the cycle. We're going to convert from this set of activities to revenue, hopefully. We better, or the cash cycle won't last very long. And by the way, everyone knows about Amazon these days. I remember when Amazon first came out with their model, and a lot of people were questioning whether they would ever get past this cycle of investing in a system that people would actually buy from. And slowly they picked up steam, and they put Borders out of business, and they put a number of other suppliers out of business, and the revenue model really worked. People took to the internet and made that revenue model work. Okay, now, is the cash cycle completed now at this point? I'm seeing some heads going this way, so why would we not say that it's complete?
Because you haven't filled out the left side of the thing up there.
That's very good. But my question is a trick question, and it could be complete here, we would say. It could be complete depending on whether we sold our goods or services for cash. Right?
Don't you still pay tithing?
That's going to come out of that revenue cycle.
Oh, okay.
That will help ensure that this keeps going. All right. So your revenue cycle could be complete at this point, because you could collect cash revenues, but very often we don't. What do we collect in exchange for the sale of our goods frequently in business? an account receivable. Somebody gives you, in exchange for your product or your time, a piece of paper that says, I will pay you X dollars on X day. And if you guys, does anyone in here remember the old Popeye cartoon show? Probably no one. I remember Popeye, and there was a favorite. He had a character on there that was my favorite. His name was Wimpy, and Wimpy was always promising to pay on Thursday for a hamburger today. I will gladly pay you Thursday for a hamburger today. Well, that then, to the recipient of Wimpy's piece of paper, that's called an account receivable or an AR. And then, when you collect, you've completed the cash cycle. Okay. Now, how important is it to you as entrepreneurs that you get this right? Very important, like life and death. Okay? After all the accounting rules and the things that Brother Bliss and I have learned over the years, and all the application of business lessons, Elder Blazer is a CPA also. He's worked with a lot of people's money and so forth. When you get down to it, at the end of the day, big or small, billions or thousands or hundreds, you've got to, as an organization, successfully complete this cash cycle. And you need to do it in such a way that more times than not, the cash cycle gets completed with more cash than you started with. Okay? That's got to happen. Now, we've talked about we talked about the name of this class being Finance for Non-Financial Managers. So I want to share with you today, plant a couple of seeds that need to get into the soil in your heads that come from the accounting world that will help you as business owners manage this cash cycle effectively. We use a couple of tools that are common to us. And you know, at the mention of accounting terms, a lot of times people just, their eyes roll in the back of their head, and they get fuzzy, and they feel like it's complicated, and it's really not that bad. So this is gonna be accounting made easy. Let's see, it's time to change colors. So I'm going to ask you this. But before I do, I want to find out if there are any plants in this room. Anyone here majoring in accounting? All right. So you can't answer this next question. We're gonna see if we can help the rest of the group. Okay? You can give them hints. The question I want you to answer is, what is the basic accounting equation? And what we're going to do is we'll draw dots, and we'll get back to this cash cycle, and you'll see how it all kind of works together. But I've got to get into your head this idea of what the basic accounting equation is. Have you heard of it? Anybody heard of it? The accounting equation? Okay, well that's a start. We've heard of it. What is it?
Assets equals liabilities plus shareholder.
Excellent. Stand up. Repeat yourself.
So you have assets that are what your company is made of, and it should be equal to your liabilities or your shareholders.
Liabilities plus equity. Okay? For short. But shareholders' equity is okay if you're in a corporate setting. What's your name?
Alex.
Can I call you Alex? All right. Let's give Alex a hand. That's excellent. Now we're going to show you, we're going to discuss for a few minutes why it's important to know that. And by the way, this is sort of one of those A minus B equals C, A minus C equals A, or B minus C equals A, and so forth. You can switch these around. Assets minus liabilities equals equity, or your assets minus your equity will equal your liabilities. So they all operate I want you to catch this word now, they all operate in balance with each other. So, we're in a finance class. We're learning about finance for the non-financial manager. We've just learned the basic accounting equation, assets equals liability plus owner's equity. And I just said that those things have to be in balance for each other. So what am I going to introduce to you next? Deafening silence. What do you think I'm going to tell you about? What's one of the basic accounting reports that we should get for every business?
Balance sheet.
The balance sheet, that's right. And this formula forms the basis for how the balance sheet works. And it was Alex. Alex taught us that, and this is an easy way to remember it for those of you who aspire to not be accountants in your life, but something else. The way to remember this is assets are equal to what I own and the liability and the combination of our liabilities and equity essentially are how I paid for it. Okay? It's just that easy. You got that? So I can go to the bank, I can borrow money, I make that injection into the business, I start my cash cycle. Hopefully I come up with enough cash when I come back to the top of the cycle to pay the bank, to pay myself, and to have a little bit of pocket money for the future. Or I could take money from my rich uncle. If only I had one. I would take money from my rich uncle, inject it in the business, run it through the operating activities, sell. If I sell on credit, I got to collect. I come back to the top of the cycle and I got to pay my rich uncle back, leave a little bit for myself, leave some money in the business, and so forth. So the liability and equity side is where the cash came from to do or to own what I own over on the asset side. And we'll get into this a little bit more. We'll actually start a little business here this morning and see how it goes. The thing that I'd have you write down, another thing I'd have you write down about your balance sheet, is that it is a snapshot. It's a picture of the business on that day. And herein lies a very important warning that I would give to any of you when you're looking at your own business, or if you're looking to buy a business, or you're evaluating whether you want to lend money into a business and so forth. A balance sheet is a picture of the business on the day it was created. Now, assuming that no one's lied in the preparation of that balance sheet, or haven't overinflated numbers, or come up with creative ways to put a balance sheet together, that balance sheet would be good for that day for telling you what the business owns and for how it got what it owns. But here's the caution. That snapshot is changing in an active business environment. It's changing every minute sometimes, every day. What you're looking at as a balance sheet from 5 months ago could be completely irrelevant today, because a lot of things could have happened from the time that snapshot was taken. It's like taking a picture of a 5-year-old and then coming back and expecting to see a 5-year-old 2 years later. They change on you. That happens. And so do financial circumstances in businesses. The other thing that I would warn you about, and this gets a little ahead of being an entrepreneur and sort of the first days of living out of the trunk of your car and trying to sell small things, but as you grow and as you begin to evaluate other businesses and so forth, you also must ask the question, what is not on the balance sheet? What are they not telling me? And so for that, you might go to what we call financial statement footnotes. But sometimes you just have to know the industry well enough to know to ask a number of questions about their accounting methods and so forth. And that's about as far as I want to go with warnings on that. But just realize that except in the simpler of businesses, there are issues hiding out in that balance sheet that could be a problem for you. It also hides things that are of value sometimes, like maybe a good reputation or a brand name that may be listed on the balance sheet but not at the right amount. So valuation is another issue. There's lots of issues inside those balance sheets. Now, we're going to go through our little example here in just a couple minutes of the starting up of a business, and then we're going to have our Q&A for our panel. The point I was making about a snapshot then leads me to the next second most important, or as important, but second statement in accounting that you need to be aware of, whether you're a finance person or not. As a business owner, you need to understand your balance sheet, and then you also need to understand the flow of activity in a business. If a snapshot is static at one point in time, there has to be something to tell us what's kind of going on from day to day in the business. Do you know what we call that? I hear a lot of mumbling, but no. Huh? Go ahead, try.
Profit and loss.
The profit and loss statement. Exactly right. What is your name?
Joyce.
Can I call you Joyce? All right. That was my mother's name. Great name. Joyce, that's exactly right. The profit and loss statement. It is also known as the income statement. They mean the same thing. The profit and loss statement, if you think of it this way, you have a balance sheet on day one. You employ all the things in the balance sheet to conduct a bunch of activities, and then you get to a balance sheet maybe a month later. Another picture of the business. The statement that kind of bridges the gap between the two is the income statement. That tells you what happened during the intervening period. So let's see how that all works. Let's do this. I'm going to have you make me up a little balance sheet here, okay? I'm going to give you a fact. On day one, Sam decides to create a business. And Sam has been saving, so he breaks his piggy bank and gets all his cash up off the floor, and he has $1,000. All right? So on day one, and he has an uncle who incorporates him for free, so he doesn't have any legal costs, and we need to have a balance sheet for Sam. So what's the balance sheet look like? Real quick. We've got cash of how much? $1,000. Good. Anything else on the asset side?
Unless you're counting knowledge or experience.
Yeah, we don't count that. It's important though, and it is an asset. But so total assets are going to be $1,000. Now, we've got to have a balance sheet that balances, folks. So how about what's on the other side of the balance sheet? Two possibilities, liabilities or equity. Do we have any liabilities? No liabilities. Didn't borrow the money from anybody. And the other possibility is equity. And the way that we'll record the equity is common stock. We're going to create another equity category here called retained earnings. Those are your friends. You like lots of retained earnings, but we have $1,000 of common stock. That's all the equity we have. And voila, you've just made your first balance sheet if you're not an accounting major. All right, now Sam goes out the very next day, and we'll step this up just a little bit. Sam buys two things. He buys inventory, an inventory of widgets. Accountants can never think of anything better than the name widget. We use it all the time. Brother Bliss and I, when we went through school, probably the same with you too, when you went through school, it was always buying widgets. I don't know why, but in any event, he goes out and for $10 a piece buys 90 widgets for his inventory, because he's in the widget selling business. And he also buys a distribution machine for $50. So he needs to be able to distribute his widgets. Okay, let's make the balance sheet. So on day 2, what's the balance sheet look like? Gotta hurry.
He's allowed, well, how much do his widgets cost?
$10 a piece. Bought 90 widgets.
So he has,
So we have, do we have any cash left over? Do we have inventory? Don't we? We have a machine. And our inventory cost us how much? 90 units times 10, $900. And how much did our distribution machine? 50. Now he's got $50 of cash. And why is that important? It balances, but it's all. But Brother Bliss, when we and I were talking about this morning, it's also important because he's going to have to do some more activity in order to get those widgets out to the public. He's got to have operating capital. So he's got some money left over. We're going to call that working. The working capital is the formal term, but we could call it operating capital. We can call it pocket cash for all we care. But the point is, you got to have cash to operate with. So hopefully Sam's been smart here, but he still has 1,000 in assets. All right. How about liabilities and equity? How much in liabilities? Anything? Come on, you guys. Did he borrow money? No, I didn't say that. He didn't borrow money. How about common stock? Did that change at all? No, still $1,000. And lo and behold, our balance sheet's in balance. Doesn't that feel good when your balance sheet balances? I remember my very first accounting 101 class, 201 in Provo. We were all inside the big Joseph Smith auditorium, and there were hundreds of people. And I'd studied with my buddy for just days and days before this test. And the last question was a balance sheet, and we knew we were going to get it. And I worked through it and worked through it and worked through it, and finally at the end in this quiet room, I cheered because my balance sheet balanced, and my poor friend next to me, he was just having a meltdown, emotional meltdown. I can't get it to balance. It was like the most important thing in the world to him. I laughed and left the room. I was very happy that day. Now we're going to make life a little bit more complicated. By the way, did we need an income statement to tell us anything about what happened on day 2 when Sam went out and bought that stuff? Not really. He didn't have any operating activity. So we're going to say that Sam goes out and he sells. Now this you're going to need to keep some numbers. Here we go. Sam sells, I'm going to give you the facts up here, 80 units at $11. Well, we're off to a good start because he only paid 10, right? So he's making $1 a unit. But as we remember, he needed to pay some people to do some things for him. He had wages of $2. He had rent of $8 because he needed some warehouse space, some selling space, and utilities of $3. Now, would we need an income statement to help us with this activity? We're going to build a balance sheet again. But would we need an income statement here? The answer is a resounding yes. Everybody say yes, we do. And why do we need to know that? Because we need to know if we're making profit. So we're going to have sales of how much? Quickly, 880. Very good. And then we're going to have what's next?
Operating costs.
Well, we'll have the operating cost, but there's one other thing. We sold some of the inventory. It's no longer on our balance sheet, right? And how much did the units cost that we sold? They were 10 each, and how many did we sell? 80. So we had cost of sales of 800. Good. So now we have something called margin. We made a little bit of margin on our sales. To you as entrepreneurs, that's your lifeblood. That's your lifeblood. It's a basic fact of life that you've got to sell whatever you're selling for more than it took you to buy it or to make it. Right? If you had sold those units for $9 a piece, you could never make it up on volume. You would never get out of the hole by just selling more at a loss. See? Basic stuff. Okay, now we did have operating costs. We got 2, and we had 8, and we had 3. And so what's our net profit? Net income? 67. Very good. All right. We made 67. How are you feeling about, if you're Sam, how are you feeling right now?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Except I forgot to tell you that all of that 880, it wasn't cash. In fact, I sold those 80 units on credit. How you feeling now? Maybe you feel okay, but now it's going to get trickier. It's going to get trickier. Brother Bliss, what am I going to be worried about with my 880?
Cash flow.
Cash flow, because it's just a piece of paper. Now, cash is just a piece of paper too, but it's a whole lot more valuable in the eyes of people than just a promise to pay. Okay, so let's build a balance sheet for Sam now. We'll start with cash. Oh, this pen isn't working so good. Can you still see this okay? Is it all right? Cash, AR now, because we have accounts receivable, we have inventory. We still have our machine, don't we? All right. Bear with me. We're getting close to the end here. To the end of the numbers. So, who wants to help me out? How much in AR have we got? 880. Because all of the sales were on credit. So we have 880. Inventory. Do we have as much inventory as we had before? No, because we sold out 80 of our 90 units. We still have how many left? 10 at how much do we pay?
10.
You're right, 10. Okay. So we still have $100 of inventory sitting on our books. The machine, whether or not it's still worth 50, and we'll ignore depreciation for now, but whether or not it's still worth 50 is up for argument, but we accountants would just still keep that on the books at 50. So how about let's play around with the liabilities and equity now for a minute. Liability and equity. How much did I say we took out in debt? Good. That's right. We didn't take out any debt, so our liabilities are still 0. Common stock, did that change? Did I go out and get money from anybody? No. So $1,000 is still there. My liabilities and equities are equal to $1,000. So how much cash? We could come at this 100 different ways, but how much cash do I have left? What? Where is it? Oh, wait. No, 880, 100.
Your equity, you're going to have equity.
Oh, yeah, 106. No, the common stock is still 1,000. I forgot to write down my retained earnings. Thank you. And we would have come to that when we got to my cash. But how much are the retained earnings now? We started with 0. And we made $67. Right, that's right. Thank you. Okay, so 1067 is the liability and equity side of our balance sheet. What does the asset side have to be equal to? 1067. It has to be. And so what does our cash have to be? Simple math, I'll make it easy because we're running out of time. You've got to have $37 in the bank. You've got to. Now, the way that we would prove that in the real world is we would come at that from about 2 or 3 different directions. We would go to the bank statement and actually prove what we had in the bank with the bank. And then we would also look at the changes in the balance sheet and prove that $37 is what we should have been left with. And so we'll get kind of two independent verifications of that $37 number now. Now the real lesson begins, okay? And I'm going to ask for the students for a couple minutes to make commentary on this sloppy balance sheet. Leave sloppiness out of it, but what as an entrepreneur are you going to be concerned about now from a financial standpoint in your business? And I'm going to ask our panelists here to listen to the answers and then be ready to fill in with insights that you have that our budding entrepreneurs need to hear. So what do you think? What are you going to be concerned about?
Accounts receivable, that's money that hasn't come in yet. What if somebody defaults or something?
Okay.
Can you repeat it for the recording?
Oh, did I have my hands up?
Just so
Oh, please. Okay, so
just repeat his answer.
yeah. You're going to worry about, how about if I put a term on it, I'll call it credit risk. There's a fancy term that means exactly what you just said. Will the person who owes me pay me? Okay, how good is that receivable? So credit risk is definitely an issue. What else? What else should I be concerned about?
You only have 10 things left, or widgets left, is that right?
So I've got 10 widgets
And no cash to get more?
and no cash to get more. And so why is that a problem? Well, what problem is that going to create?
You're in the business of selling widgets, so if you don't have any widgets, then you don't have a business.
Yeah, so I have to have a way to finance my growth, right? So ostensibly low level of inventory, and the question is how do I grow it? Now I'm going to start worrying about what's happening down here in the liability and equity part of my balance sheet, because I'm going to be looking for money pretty soon, unless I can collect these ARs pretty fast. That would be another way that I could finance my growth. I could because there is some profit buried in those ARs. I sold at a profit. If I collect the profit back, then I can plow some of that profit right back into the business and buy more inventory. But the collectability and the speed of collectability on the ARs may get out of kilter with the timing at which I need to buy my inventory. They run in cycles. And if that AR cycle gets too slow and your inventory cycle needs to pick up, you're either going to have to go out and pick up money from somebody else, or you could be not selling widgets. What else do you see? These are very good comments. What else do you see?
Expenses for operations. What do you think about that one?
What about that?
Well, if your cash flow is going to deplete really fast, if your expenses continue without anything coming in.
Yeah, those, and you make a very important point. A number of your expenses, they happen when the sun comes up, and they don't go away.
About taxes.
Taxes would be another issue. I would just include that right down in as part of your operating expenses. But you're right. You've got to make provision for the taxes. Brother Bliss has a story he's going to tell us here more close to the end. Get you ready for lunch. But it's a perfect example of what we're talking about. So let's keep exploring this. The expenses, they keep coming. You've talked about the need to buy inventory. What lesson is emerging for you? Have you heard of something called working capital? Is that a term that you're used to working with and hearing? Do you have enough working capital? Now, I'd be interested to hear from Elder, I want to say Blazer. Elder Blazer, to tell us about how you figure out how much working capital to have. What can these students do to work with this kind of issue?
How much working capital do you need?
Yeah, how do you define that? How do you plan for it?
Working capital is the lifeblood of your business. And if you run out of working capital, you run out of your business. And you've got to figure out what your conversion cycle is going to be on your accounts receivable, how fast that's going to turn back into cash. And if it's longer than the time necessary to keep your inventory going, you're going to have to go out and find infusion either from an outside source or from an inside source to put more money back into your business.
That's right.
And when you run out of those sources to put money in your business, you run out of your business.
Exactly. Brother Tanner, you've started businesses, you've run them, you I believe probably still have them. What's a regular activity that you do as a business owner?
If it's a service or a product, usually you need to have, most companies need to have at least 4 months worth of operating capital. And many, they want to have at least a year's worth. But for a startup, you're going to need something that's going to make it so you can go out and buy some more inventory before you get your accounts receivable. Because if they take 30 days or more to get paid, you've got to have at least 2 months, just a minimal. But you really need more than that typically. It depends on your turn.
The other statement that you really need besides your balance sheet, your income statement, is your cash flow statement.
Yep.
You've got to know how cash flows, how it goes in, and how it goes out. And the understanding of that is even probably more important than understanding balance sheet or income.
That's absolutely right. I chose not to present the cash flow statement because it does get quite complicated, and I would substitute I agree with you, but I would say at an elementary level, if I'm just sitting down at my dinner table and I do know how to do a little balance sheet and I can do a little income statement, then if I don't prepare a cash flow statement in the standard format that we use, I prepare something called a budget. Okay? I just put together a plan for my business, and maybe across the top of a piece of paper, or I guess today now it's Excel spreadsheets. I used to use 14-column, 21-column paper, and we'd do it in pencil, and if we made a mistake in month one, it flowed all the way through. It was such an irritation. But on an Excel spreadsheet, at least I would put together a cash flow plan. And it would include the elements of the balance sheet and the income statement. And it might show me selling something, but I wouldn't show that sale until I actually plan to collect it. So I would convert from, this is called the accrual method of accounting. We accrue our sales, we accrue our expenses, we show them when that happens. But you need to understand how the cash flows through your business. And what you'll need to be able to demonstrate to yourself is exactly what Elder Blazer and Brother Tanner and Brother Bliss is going to tell us about in just a minute, because it's a good local example of needing to plan for cash flow in your business. And then, oh yes, comment.
It was from the very beginning, and I really have no idea, I'm just asking, is the profit margin too small to really make this work? Do they need to sell for more than $11?
Yeah, well, that's one question that you ask yourself after you start rolling through your cash projections and you start to estimate your operating expenses and your projections of the cost of inventory, whether they'll go up or down depending on volume purchases. There are 101 questions to answer in determining that question, the question of pricing. But did all of you gather the ideas, though, that Sister Tanner is mentioning? That it's at a simple level, this is how it all works, but there are many considerations that we could add on, and if I were teaching a several-week course, we would go into those things. But one of the issues that Sister Tanner mentions is this pricing issue. Have I priced it enough so that I can handle the long haul? Okay? So Yes.
A lot of those pricing issues aren't determined by you.
That's
They're
right.
determined by the industry that you're in.
That's right.
It's because that's how much the market will bear.
Yep.
So before you go into it, it's important for you to do your budget, determine if you want to get into that industry.
I could not have said that better. And, you know, we talked about the 3 legs on the stool. That's where your marketing department is going to be very helpful to you. And if you don't have a department, if the department is you, you're going to need to go out and do, among other things, a pricing study to see what your competition is doing and see what you can afford to sell your product for and so forth. So there are a lot of considerations here now. It is, 5 to 12, time to quit. Mike, I just wanted you to take a minute, and I wanted you to share a real-life story about someone who started a Quiznos franchise and what happened.
Just to make it brief, this is what happened just here locally, and probably all of you know about it, but there's a member of our stake who started a business, a Quiznos business. And actually I was pretty excited because I'm kind of a Quiznos fan. So. But he spent a lot of money, and I won't give you his dollar figures, but he spent a lot of money getting the franchise, then converting the area where he was going to be housing his Quiznos business, and just all of these upfront costs were just a huge amount of outlay by him for his business. Now he begins the business, and he's not making the sales as rapidly as he had hoped. So Brother Tanner rightly said, you've got to have a working capital that'll go out for quite a while, and depending on the business that you have, you need to give some time for your idea or your product or whatever to catch on, because if it's a new product or a new idea, it may be a while before people accept that idea. In about 3 months' time, this individual was out of business. When I talked to him, his comment was, I just can't make enough to pay all of the bills. So he didn't have enough working capital to keep him sustained even over a few months, even though he had some revenue stream coming in from the sale at Quiznos. He had so many other expenses that it took him under, and he lost all of this investment of considerable amount of money. So it's really important when you start a business, you sit down with a realistic budget, and you forecast that budget out for a period of time, determine how long, with some good analysis by you and perhaps others, how long is it going to take for my product to catch on? What's going to be the forecast of how much I can sell, and do all of those things. It'll just help you so you'll be more successful more quickly.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of our little mini session today. We could probably expand this into a 3-hour discussion and go much deeper, but at least it gives you an idea of the basic financial issue. Just to recap here, the basic financial issue that you all face in business, and that is the cash cycle. We live and die by the cash cycle. And that there are a number of decisions to make within the operation of that cash cycle that are very important, that will impact you months out into your business. Knowing a little bit about how the balance sheet works and keeping that in your mind, if that's the best place to keep it, and how the P&L works, will help you greatly with that, in addition to doing some planning and preparation and understanding your business. So with that, we'll close our session today and turn it back to Brother Tanner.
Great. Thank you.